I'm a single parent, raising my teenage son on my own. A few years back, I was in a car accident that left me with chronic pain and mobility issues. Some days are better than others, but I've learned to adapt and keep pushing forward for my kids' sake. Living in southern Arizona, the heat can be unbearable, especially when you're dealing with constant pain. That's why I'm grateful for my disability parking license plates. They allow me to park closer to store entrances, which makes a world of difference on bad days. So last night was one of those bad days. The pain was flaring up something fierce, but we were out of groceries and my son needed food for school the next day. I had no choice but to drag myself to the store. I managed to find a parking spot close to the entrance. It wasn't a handicapped space, but it was right next to one, bordering the access aisle. As I slowly made my way through the aisle, leaning heavily on my cane, I heard the sound of an engine revving behind me. Before I could react, I felt something hit my back. A car was actually pushing into me. I stumbled forward, pain shooting through my body. The woman in the car yelled at me to get out of her way, saying she needed to park. I shouted back, explaining that this wasn't a parking spot but a handicap access aisle. The woman, who I'll call Karen, backed up slightly and then got out of her white Lexus. She stormed towards me, her face red with anger. Karen angrily demanded that I move my car, accusing me of blocking her parking spot. I told her that she had just hit me with her car, which was assault, and that I was going to call the police. Karen threatened to tell the police that I had assaulted her. At this point, I'd had enough. I pulled out my phone and started recording. I asked Karen if she wanted to repeat her threat for the camera, suggesting that people online would love to see this. Karen mockingly called me the parking lot police and made a ridiculous siren noise before stomping off into the store, leaving her car blocking the van parked in the actual handicap spot. A few minutes later, an elderly man in a mobility scooter came out of the store. He only had one leg and was clearly struggling to get to his van. He asked me if I knew whose car was blocking his vehicle. I explained the situation to him, and we were soon joined by a store employee. As they tried to figure out what to do, I called the police to report the incident. That's when Karen came back out of the store. Instead of apologizing or moving her car, she started mocking the elderly man. She cruelly suggested that if he couldn't take care of himself, he shouldn't be out in public. She then turned to me, hurling more insults before getting in her car and leaning on the horn. The store employee managed to help the elderly man load his groceries and squeeze out of the spot. Karen then peeled out of the aisle, nearly hitting me again as she left. I asked the police dispatcher if they had heard everything that happened. The dispatcher confirmed they had, but explained that no officers were available at the moment. They assured me that the call had been recorded and that they would contact me later in the week to get the video evidence. I finally made it into the store, my body aching more than ever. As I grabbed a cart to lean on, I saw Karen driving by the storefront. She pretended to swerve towards me, honking her horn before speeding off. The whole incident left me shaken, but also determined. I may be disabled, but I'm not helpless. I made sure to follow up with the police and provided them with the video evidence. It turns out that blocking a handicap access aisle carries a hefty fine in our area, over $500. A week later, I received a call from the police department. They informed me that thanks to my video and the recorded call, they were able to identify Karen and issue her multiple citations. Not only did she get fined for blocking the access aisle, but she also faced charges for reckless driving and assault with a vehicle. The officer told me that Karen tried to argue her way out of it, but when faced with the evidence, she had no choice but to accept the consequences. He also mentioned that they would be keeping an eye on her in the future, as this wasn't her first offense. It's people like Karen who make life harder for those of us with disabilities, and it's important to hold them accountable. Let me take you back a few years to when I was working in the legal department of a huge national retail chain. We're talking over 1,000 stores across the country. My job? Handling customer complaints that got escalated to the point where folks started throwing around legal threats. It was one day when I got a call about a customer who was threatening to sue us over a rewards program mishap. Our customer service team had already tried to handle it, but this woman wasn't having it. She'd left me a voicemail that was dripping with entitlement and barely veiled threats. I sighed, wiped the sweat from my brow, and started digging into the case. Turns out this lady, let's call her Karen because, well, if the shoe fits, had made a big back-to-school shopping trip for her kids. She'd spent enough to qualify for one of our reward coupons, but it never showed up in her mailbox. I checked our system and spotted the issue right away. We had an old address on file for her rewards account. No biggie, right? People move all the time. I figured I'd give her a call, update the address, and send out the coupon with a little something extra for the inconvenience. I called Karen and introduced myself, explaining that I was calling about her rewards coupon issue. Karen immediately lashed out, demanding to know how long she'd been waiting for someone to fix this problem. I tried to smooth things over by apologizing for the delay and explaining the situation. I offered to send her the $10 coupon she'd earned, plus an extra $25 for her trouble. Karen angrily insisted that we should have known her address had changed and demanded $1,000 in cash, threatening to sue if we didn't comply. I explained that we couldn't do that, but reiterated our offer to provide the coupon she was entitled to under our rewards program. Karen cut me off, threatening that we'd be hearing from her lawyer. I sat there staring at the phone, wondering if I'd somehow slipped into an alternate reality where $10 coupons were worth suing over. Karen actually filed a lawsuit against us. Breach of contract, fraud, you name it. If she could think of a charge, she threw it in there. Over a $10 coupon that we were more than willing to send her, plus extra compensation. I took the case to my boss, our chief operating officer. He was a no-nonsense kind of guy. I asked my boss what he thought we should do. He turned the question back on me, asking what I wanted to do. I told him honestly that I'd rather pay a lawyer to fight this than give in to her demands, as it would set a dangerous precedent. He agreed, giving me the go-ahead to fight the case. That's how I ended up on the phone with a lawyer I'd worked with before. Let's call him the Awesome Attorney. When I told the Awesome Attorney about the case against Karen, he was thrilled. He joked that he should be paying us for the opportunity to go up against her. He eagerly agreed to take our case, even offering to do it at a discount. We came up with a strategy to not only defend ourselves, but to countersue Karen under the state's frivolous lawsuit statute. When Karen realized she'd have to hire her own lawyer to defend against our counterclaim, things started to change. Suddenly, she was a lot more interested in settling. Karen's lawyer reached out proposing that both parties drop their suits with no money exchanged. I asked the Awesome Attorney for his opinion on this offer. He advised that while we could push forward, courts don't tend to like vindictiveness, so it might be best to settle and be done with it. In the end, we agreed to the settlement. Our company paid $900 in legal fees, but get this, Karen had to shell out $1,700 to her own lawyer, all over a $10 coupon that was sent to the wrong address because she hadn't updated her information. I've got plenty more stories where that came from. Working in customer service legal might not be amazing, but it's never ever boring. I've always been a city boy, but my mom has this little garden in a village about 30 minutes from where we live. It's not big enough to call a farm, but it's our little slice of heaven where we can escape the hustle and bustle of city life and indulge in our love for plants. We've put years of hard work into that garden. Every weekend, I'd load up my noisy, heavy weed whacker into my Chevy Cruze and make the journey with my mom. We'd spend hours tending to our vegetables and trees, including a small patch of bamboo we were particularly proud of. For years, my mom had been complaining about things going missing from the garden. It broke my heart to see her so upset, especially because I knew how much love and effort she poured into every plant. I always suspected someone was stealing, but we never had any proof. That all changed yesterday. We decided to make an early trip to the garden, arriving around 6 a.m. to beat the heat. As we turned the corner, we caught someone red-handed, stealing 2 massive bamboo shoots from our garden. The worst part? It was my mom's friend, a woman in her mid-20s who my mom had grown close to over the years. I never liked her much. She always seemed too nosy about our affairs, but seeing her there, stealing from us, made my blood boil. I yelled at her, demanding to know what she thought she was doing. The woman tried to run, but I blocked her path. I'm a big guy, about 230 pounds, and there was no way she was getting past me. I accused her of stealing from us and betraying our friendship. The thief stammered out a weak excuse, saying she didn't know we'd be there today. I angrily pointed out that this didn't make her actions okay and demanded to know how long she'd been doing this. My mom stood there in shock, unable to process what was happening. I, on the other hand, was livid. I berated the thief, asking if she had any idea how much work we put into the garden and how upset my mom had been every time something went missing. The thief then tried to claim that Kok Mo, my mom's sister who lives next door, had given her permission to take some bamboo shoots. By this time, the commotion had drawn a small crowd, including my aunt. My aunt quickly denied ever giving such permission, leaving the thief looking pale and scrambling for another excuse. She then tried to justify her actions by claiming that if she hadn't harvested the shoots, they would have gone to waste. I angrily explained to her that bamboo shoots grow into trees if left alone, which was exactly what we wanted. The thief, running out of excuses, weakly claimed that she didn't do this often. By now, other villagers had gathered around, murmuring among themselves. The thief kept repeating that it was a one-time mistake, and some people seemed to believe her. But I wasn't having it. I challenged her claim, reminding her that my mom had been complaining about missing plants for years and demanded to know how many times she had stolen from us. The thief couldn't answer. She just stood there, clutching the stolen bamboo shoots, looking desperately at my mom for help. My mom, always the peacemaker, pulled her aside to talk privately. I was still fuming, but I knew that in this small farming community, reputation was everything. The damage was already done. As they talked, I explained to the gathered crowd how we'd been working on growing our bamboo patch, planning to harvest sustainably once we had enough trees. I told them about all the weekends we'd spent working in the garden, only to have our hard work stolen. The villagers listened, and I could see the disgust on their faces. In a tight-knit community like this, stealing from your neighbors is one of the worst things you can do. When my mom came back, she looked tired and disappointed. She didn't say much about her conversation with the thief, but I noticed the woman slinking away, head down, avoiding everyone's eyes. In the days that followed, we didn't see the thief around at all. Word had spread quickly about what she'd done, and it seemed like the entire village was giving her the cold shoulder. My mom was sad about losing a friend, but I felt vindicated. Our garden was safe, and the person responsible for years of theft and heartache had finally faced consequences. I met my ex-wife during college. We were young, naive, and head over heels in love. At least that's what I thought at the time. I came from a family of lawyers, so I always had a good head for finances and planning for the future. My ex, on the other hand, was more of a free spirit. She loved to live in the moment, which I found exciting at first. But as time went on, I realized her carefree attitude extended to her spending habits too. We got married right after graduation. I landed a decent job at a tech startup, while she jumped from one retail job to another. I didn't mind being the primary breadwinner. I thought it was temporary until she found her passion. But months turned into years, and her temporary situation became our new normal. Despite her sporadic income, her spending never slowed down. Fancy clothes, fancy restaurants, impromptu weekend getaways, you name it, she bought it. I tried to talk to her about budgeting, but she'd always brush it off. When I brought up our financial concerns, my ex-wife would tell me to lighten up. She'd say we were young and should enjoy life while we could. I'd try to explain that we needed to think about our future and couldn't keep maxing out our credit cards. She'd dismiss my worries, insisting everything would work out. But it didn't work out. Our arguments about money became more frequent and heated. Then she dropped a bombshell. She was pregnant. I thought this might be the wake-up call she needed to get serious about our finances. For a while, it seemed like it was. She cut back on her spending and we focused on preparing for our child. When our kid was born, I was over the moon. I thought we'd finally turned a corner, but old habits die hard. As soon as she recovered from the delivery, the spending spree started again. This time, it was all in the name of our child. My ex-wife would argue that our baby deserved the best and we couldn't skimp on things. When I'd suggest more affordable options, like a cheaper stroller that was just as good, she'd accuse me of not understanding. She'd complain that I was always at work while she had to deal with everything all day. The final straw came about a year before our divorce. My ex had been complaining about her old car, saying it wasn't safe for our child. Against my better judgment, I agreed to buy her a new hybrid Highlander. I took out the loan in my name, thinking it would be easier that way. For a while, things seemed okay. But then the late notices started coming in. One missed payment became 2, then 3. My credit score, which I'd worked so hard to build, started to plummet. I confronted her about it. When I confronted her about the missed payments, reminding her of her promise and explaining the impact on my credit score, she'd apologize and claim things had been tight. She'd ask if I could cover it just one more time. But it wasn't just one time. It became a pattern. I found myself constantly bailing her out, paying for maintenance, even buying new tires because I couldn't bear the thought of our child being in an unsafe vehicle. The divorce was messy, but I managed to represent myself and came out relatively unscathed. No alimony, no spousal support, just shared custody of our kid. Even after the divorce, she kept missing payments on the car. My credit score was in freefall, and I knew I had to do something drastic. So when she went on a trip with her new boyfriend, I saw my chance. I took the car back and sold it to cover the remaining loan. When she came back and found out, she was livid. She yelled at me, demanding to know how she was supposed to get around and how our child would get to school. I told her she should have thought about that before stopping payments, and that I couldn't keep sacrificing my financial future for her irresponsibility. She threatened to sue me, but I reminded her that both the car and the loan were in my name, so she had no legal grounds. She took off, threatening all sorts of legal action, but I knew she was bluffing. Her credit score was in the gutter and she couldn't afford a decent lawyer if she tried. It's been a few weeks since then. My ex is still fuming, but she's had to face reality. She's had to downgrade her lifestyle significantly and is finally learning to live within her means. I'm slowly rebuilding my credit and focusing on providing a stable environment for our child during my custody time.